That's me, that's my name. And thanks a lot for the warm welcome. I am Derek. I'm here to talk a little bit about the nodes and try and put it in a nutshell for you guys. Just by a show of hands, how many people have done a project in Node at all? Awesome, so a bunch of people. And how many people have either never done one or just played around with it, sort of installed it on their machine, kind of goofed around a bit? Fantastic, so great. Yeah, this is definitely the intro to, so I'm not gonna be talking about anything too advanced. I come to Node myself as I think of myself as a learner. I've not been doing it that long, though who has, because it's not been around very long. I work at the working group here in Toronto. We do, as Robin said, a bunch of different kinds of stuff. We work with, we do web apps and mobile apps. And we work with big enterprise clients and small startups. And traditionally, it's been a lot of Rails. But lately, it's been a lot of JavaScript. Actually, before I joined there, I had sort of I guess I've been doing development for a while and realized at a certain point I had never really learned JavaScript properly, even though I'd done it a bunch. I don't know if any of you feel that same way, that it was just a weird thing to you always. So at my previous job, I just decided okay, let's get my head straight about this, and I sort of got a bunch of books and read JavaScript: The Good Parts by Crockford and JavaScript patterns, and I was doing a bunch of front end jQuery stuff, so I wanted to get a lot better at that. And then I sort of met up with the TWG guys when I wasn't working for them yet, and they host this event called NerdLearn, which is every once in a while they'll do this one night beer and pizza thing where they focus on one topic. And that night the topic was called the future of JavaScript, which sounds pretty fancy, but it was one of the most popular NerdLearn events. And I was there and I met all those guys, and they were talking about kind of Backbone and Angular, and this is a couple years ago, so I don't know, that was really new at the time. They were talking about Ember and how to do that all right, and how sort of apps were moving into the client side instead of being server-side generated so much. So that really piqued my interest. I loved hearing about that. I hit it off with those guys, and I seriously, right after that, I quit my job and went and worked for them instead. And at the time, they had not really done any back-end JavaScript code, nor had I. But then it was funny because as soon as I got there, we got this big client project, this big enterprise company came to us with an enormous Node.JS application for us to work on, which was sort of new to us. And they were oh, they had actually been at that same NerdLearn event, the future of JavaScript. They were there, and they were oh, you guys are into JavaScript, we need help with it. So we all learned kind of Node together on this enormous app, and I sort of saw how beautiful it could be. And then shortly after that, like I said, I don't know if I mentioned, but TWG, on the web anyway, is all Ruby. Those guys love Ruby on Rails, and so do I. And historically, back in the day, it had been more PHP and Drupal-based CMS sites, but that's sort of the world that it lived in. But after we did this one big Node project, we start to slowly see how Node is in a tiny way sort of kind of starting to creep into what we do. So after that big Node.js app I talked about was done, we started working on another project that we have called Postage App, which is just this email delivery service we built internally. And we sort of it's it's a network service, and we need a bunch of different little parts, and we started to see how Node would fit those little bits. And so we started writing proxy servers to help us do some things. And we wrote a backup API server in Node. Even though it was mostly Ruby based, we started to see Node was better at a couple little pieces. And then that pattern kept happening, project after project. We'd see okay, well, we'll do this thing in Rails, but oh, this one little bit over here is sort of way better in Node. For example, we did a big web and mobile project for Sobeys, the grocery store, recently, and they had this internal service that needed to be part of the application, but we didn't really want to expose the whole thing, so we put a little Node proxy in front of it that just exposed with proper authentication the little bits that we needed. So by this point, we had been doing a bunch of periphery Node projects and sort of getting our feet wet slowly with it, and really measured steps. And I guess recently we did our first what I would call full-on Node project, which is for TSN. We just launched a hockey application. So if you're a hockey fan, you can grab the TSN hockey app. We built that as a native iOS application, but it needed a JSON API, and it needed to do push notifications for sports stats. So if you're sitting there watching the Leaf game, or maybe if you can't watch it, you want to get notified when someone scores, or you want to get notified when the game's going to start. We built this Node server that sort of like watches all the feeds, and like when events happen, it like sends push notifications to all the mobile clients. So that was like, to me, like our first real like, okay, we're doing this centrally in Node on the server side. And so like we just literally launched that about a month ago. And so I'm, like I said, like that's kind of like my background with it. So I very much am a learner. Like I've done very few projects in it, and hopefully I can just try and answer some of the questions that you might have that I had very recently. And so like the number one question is like, what is this thing even good for? Like seriously, because if like, isn't it just yet another framework? Like you could probably do all the same stuff you figure in the framework of your choice. Like I talked about Ruby and Rails, and like, you know, we prefer to write in Ruby when we can. And like you might be the same, maybe you use Python or PHP, you know, maybe you're doing WordPress sites, or maybe you're a .NET guy or something, and you're like, well, I can basically do all the same stuff, like what's all the fuss about? So what I'm gonna try and do is like, there's a million things that I could say, like a million good things about Node, and like, I'll leave that all up to you to discover. But there's a few things that I think like Node is just like fantastic at, and I'm just gonna highlight those really quickly right now. And so if you're trying to like convince a teammate that like Node's a good idea for a project, or if you're trying to convince your boss, or maybe you're just like trying to convince yourself or like figure it out for yourself, like these are the things for me that like when we're deciding like, is this a good fit for Node? These are the things that like make it a yes rather than like a maybe or a no. So the first one is like if you're doing a JSON API. Like this one, like this use case is a kind of a no-brainer to me. If you've got, like if your server-side project is basically just a JSON API, and like hopefully you guys know what that is, like JSON is just like, instead of XML, like a data interchange format where you can like hit some URLs and get some data, and then you would use that to power, say, like a mobile application. Or, you know, let's say you have like a Backbone or an Angular app or an Ember app that like is totally not server-side. Like, so the server-side part of your application is just an API. I think Node like knocks it out of the park for this use case. It's like fast, like in terms of like delivering the content, it's insanely fast. It's fast and easy to write in. It's easy to scale up in case you get a ton of traffic all of a sudden. And like it just speaks JSON natively. It is JavaScript, obviously. So like there's not like this like impedance mismatch between like the way your programming language represents hashes or objects, and then like having to map those over to JavaScript all the time. So like that's the use case number one. Like, so if you have a project like this, like reach for Node, you won't be disappointed. The second one, as I said, is like network servers, which is probably like doesn't come up as much, but then again, maybe it does. As soon as you realize you have this tool in your box, as soon as you realize the power of like how easy it is to build servers using Node, it sort of starts to come up. Like I said, we would have never built our own like proxy server for Postage app. It doesn't sound like a fun thing to do, and we would have never built like a proxy server for that Sobeys internal service if it wasn't like really easy and fun and like simple and straightforward and like takes a day kind of thing. Traditionally, like writing a network server is very difficult, and like Node, I guess like I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but the core Node API has like a bunch of primitives for creating servers, for accepting connections, and for holding onto those connections and like responding to things. It makes that very easy to do. Like if you hit the Node core documentation, like I think the first example is like, here's how to spin up a web server. Like who would write their own web server? Traditionally, if you write an app in Ruby, or if you write an app in PHP, like your app is one thing and the server is another thing. But in Node, they're literally together in the app that you write. So like network servers, I can't drive that point home enough. It's sort of a primitive that you get to work with, which is amazing. And that directly like leads into my next point, which is like a fancy word. Real-time applications is like a buzzword, but really this is sort of building on the idea that you have like this power, this like network server building toolkit in your hands. There's kind of like a bunch of technologies like WebSockets and WebRTC that are coming out that sort of flip the model of like what it is to be a web application on its head a little bit. Where traditionally web apps were sort of, it's almost like it was almost just like a big document store. Like the web was always just like almost static, even though we have real-time, not real-time, but like dynamic web applications where they're they're composed dynamically when someone requests a page. Really, all it is like documents. In terms of like the HTTP operators that we have are like get, which is like give me the document, and like post, which is like I'm putting a document. And it's like and delete the document. Like it doesn't get much more complicated than that. But WebSocket sort of like puts that aside and just says like, okay, all the clients are connected to the server all the time, and they can talk in both directions. So whenever any data happens, like we're gonna sort of like just tell everybody immediately. And then sort of WebRTC takes that to the next level, where the clients also connect to each other all at the same time, and they can talk to each other. So there's a big mesh of people just sending data willy-nilly in all directions. And like Node is so good at helping you build that. And like I've barely built any of that kind of stuff. Like we did a bit of real-time work for that TSN JSON API. We had some WebSocket stuff built in, but like it's early days, I think. But like looking out into the future, I really believe that this is going to become like the bread and butter of like what web applications are. And so, yeah, the ability to just soak up those connections and host a bunch of socket connections is something that Node is very, very good at. And like other frameworks, other very popular frameworks are sort of like bad at / impossible to do in. I don't know if you guys feel that way, but like it's just really hard to do WebSockets in Rails. It's like a real big weird hack. Or like in PHP or in Python, you always have to run some other thing and a bunch of weird libraries. It's not really like the golden path. So those are like, to me, like the three big reasons to use it. These are like, that's like the argument for your boss or your teammate or for yourself for why you want to use it. You probably want to use it anyway because you're here, but it'll give you a bit of rationale there. So let's talk about modules, because like this is kind of the big thing, really. Like if you want to figure out like how to write it, so we just talked about like, okay, why you want to write one, but the how is all about modules. Like I can't really stress it enough. I pretty much should have done my whole presentation on just modules, because like the Node module system is sort of like the way that you package up little bits of functionality and reuse it within your app. And like here we have like a basic require statement, and like the way, like you're pretty much, if you've done any development in any environment, you're pretty much familiar with require, but like the way it works in Node is completely different. I'll talk about that in a second. And in Node, it's just like constantly writing modules and constantly using other people's modules and sharing your work as modules. Literally, like everything in Node is a module. Like, so it like blows Keanu Reeves' mind. Like poor Bill or Ted, I can't remember which one he was, but he's pretty psyched about it. So like the code that you write in your app, like every file that you write in a Node application is a module. Like there's no such, like there are kind of classes in JavaScript, but like if you write one in Node, you write it as a module. So I'll like show you how that works in a second. When you use someone else's library, you're requiring it and it's a module. And like those two things together, like that's your app. It's like the stuff you use and the stuff that you write. Together, your app is its own module. So like this module pattern is like literally everywhere. You can't get away from it. So I'll sort of like step you through a little bit about how that works. I apologize. I was absolutely forced to use, is it Doge? Is it Doge? I don't know. There's like the jury's out on how to say it, but like basically, I'm gonna go with Doge.js is gonna be our example module that I'm gonna walk you through. Like this is like super basic example, really contrived, but just to show you like how the pattern works and like how powerful it is and like what the differences are. So yeah, I'm not gonna live code this because if I did, my computer would probably blow up and the demo would be over and I would start crying and run away. But I've got it like hopefully pretty simple on the screen here. Like this is my editor. I've got one file open. This is my first file in my application. I just called it doge.js. It's got like a really simple piece of functionality. It's like say. It takes like two words, A and B, and it like returns a string that would say those two words like in Doge style. It's like, wow, such A, much B, and then that's it. It's just like bare bones method that just does one little thing. But like the magic is in like lines 10 through 12 there. It's like this thing, I don't know if you've seen it before, but like there's this, in every file that you write, in every node file, in every file in every Node application is like this global called module.exports. You could just say exports, and like there's other things on module as well, but like really you always want to export what the public interface is to what you've written. Because everything in every JavaScript file is like by default private. So like if you write a function and just don't export anything at the bottom, nothing else in your application is going to be able to use that. So you need to explicitly export the things that you want to reuse within your app. So I've done that here. I've like made my one function, and I've exported that function on like an object. So like we just have a simple object that we're exporting, and it's got like the object has say, which just refers back to like the say function at the top. So like really this is like lines 10 through 12, that's like what the rest of the application sees. Doesn't really see the internal code at all. So we want to try and like, now that we've written this, we want to use it somewhere. So I'm going to add a second file to my project and call it like program.js. And like this is just the thing that uses the library I wrote, runs it, and outputs the response to the console. So hopefully like this is pretty understandable, but like again, there's a bit of special magic on line 2. So like, traditionally in other languages, when you require something, it sort of like loads all the code and puts it all in a global namespace. So if you've declared some classes or some constants or a bunch of methods or whatever, they're all available by name, and like you go like my app : my class : my method, or whatever it is. But in Node, there's absolutely no concept of a global namespace. And indeed, in JavaScript, there isn't one either. So like we sort of have to say we're like declaring a variable that will like capture the require as a thing. So in this file, like Doge is gonna get what we put on module.export. So like lines 10 through 12 here are literally gonna be assigned to that variable here. So we can call on line 4 doge.say, and then like basically like run this on the command line, node program.js, just gonna run that thing. It's all gonna work, and it's gonna output some text. So hopefully like that's like, I couldn't reduce it any further. That's the essence of modules, and like it might still seem a bit weird to you, but like just use it and like try and like get it, because it's different. But once you do understand it, it's really powerful and amazing. Like I said, nothing else works that way. Especially in the way that like there's no global namespace, and like that seems like a weird, maybe negative thing, but it's actually the thing that makes Node's module ecosystem the best, in my opinion, out of all frameworks, because you don't really have dependency hell. You can have multiple versions of the same library loaded in your application at the same time, and everything has their own private namespace. I won't get into it, but I just gotta recommend, I gotta like thumbs up that module system. So now that we've written some code, we should probably write some tests for the code. Michael Feathers has this awesome book called like Maintaining Legacy Software, and like his quote is like, anything that doesn't have tests is immediately legacy code. So I don't want to write some code that's immediately legacy, so let's do some testing. There's a couple packages. NPM, like I'm going to get to this in a minute, but NPM is like a central repository for Node packages. It's called Node Package Manager, which is the command line tool I'm using here. Mocha and Chai are two packages that you can use to help you write tests. Mocha just like lets you construct tests, and then Chai helps you like assert things within them. So I don't know if you've done any test-driven development, but like these are basically the two most popular packages, I think, for doing that. So like there's a bunch of stuff that this will output when you run it yourself on your machine, but I've like skipped that for brevity. But like what I'm doing here is like I'm saying npm install Mocha, and that's gonna go into the internet, fetch that package, and put it in my project, literally like put those files in my project. And the same thing for Chai. So now I have those two things available. I'm gonna go ahead and test my Doge module. So this looks like a little bit verbose, but it's really only doing a couple things. So on line 1, I'm requiring Chai's assertion library. So as you can see, like that required Chai bit loads Chai, but I really only want the bit that they export called assert. So I'm just like saying like, hey, give me the assertions. I'm requiring my own library because I'm gonna need to test it. And like, as I said, you can't get access to your own methods unless you require them explicitly. And then I'm just describing my module and what it can do, and I'm asserting on lines 8, 9, and 10 that it does the thing that it's meant to. And so when I run that on the command line by invoking like the Mocha command line tool, and like I said, Mocha is that structure for writing tests, it'll just like find all my tests that I've written automatically. I don't know if you can see that tiny dot. It found one test, and it ran it, and it works. So that's that's just like an example of testing really briefly, but also how to sort of like take packages out of NPM and like include them into your app. So I found this stupid cartoon from 1993 when I guess like the internet was super crazy to everybody. And it says like, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog, so I thought it was apropos. We want to put our stupid module on the internet. We want to make it like web enabled, because what's the point of just having some code that runs locally? So I'm going to do this exact same pattern. I'm going to npm install Express. Express, somebody else is going to probably talk a little bit more about Express today. Express is a really good module, a bunch of functionality to help you write web servers and just respond to web requests. It's got a bunch of great stuff. Like Node itself, like I said, has the ability to be a web server, but it's like cumbersome and hard to use. So we're going to just install Express, and then I'm going to make our 4th file in the project called server, and this module is just going to be a little web server that serves our Doge, our Doge.say basically. And so like on line 1, like hopefully the pattern is sort of like becoming a little bit clear. We're bringing in Express by requiring it. And like there's a little bit of a difference. You see how like Express, there's no path? Like when I require Doge, I'm saying // which literally means like you can find this module like right beside this file on the file system. But Express, it doesn't have a path, which just means like we got this from NPM. So just include it from wherever you installed it to. So I'm pulling in those two modules. On line 4, I'm starting a new Express web server. On line 6 through 8, I'm saying like, hey, when someone requests like the root of this site, just rests. So you get these two, every web request gives you like request and response in Express. So I'm just saying like, whenever a request comes in, respond with the output of Doge.say. And then on line 10, I'm just saying like, hey, listen to port 3000. And that's literally a web server in like 10 lines of code. And you can try it out by just going into your browser, hitting localhost :3000, and you'll get the exact output of what you wrote. So that's like not really that useful. Back to this slide, you can sort of like see like on line 7, like I'm doing a really stupid thing, and like that's not going to be helpful to anybody. But that is where you put your application logic. Like if you're writing a JSON API, this is like on line 7. That's where you call like a database module that you wrote to go and get something out of the database. And then like response.send the database object, like if someone's getting like their user information, or if you're like sensing the weather and returning like how warm it is outside today. On line 7 is where you'd probably up on line 3, you'd like require your weather.js thing that like goes and figures out how, like what the temperature is. And then on line 7, you're going to respond with the temperature. And like really, like I'm just responding with a string right now, but you can respond with JSON, like JavaScript objects, and they'll automatically come out as JSON. Like I said, it's very easy to do JSON APIs. So that's the basic structure there. So at this point, we've basically written an application. We like wrote some code, tested it, added a command line interface to it, put it on the web. And the last thing we need to do, like if we think that our little app that we wrote is usable to other people, is write a special file called package.json in the root of our project. So the point of this is like a couple things. Like if you want to put your app on NPM, NPM being the the central repository for all packages, then you just describe what it is. You give it a name and a version, and you say what it depends on, so that when other people install it, it automatically brings with it the dependencies. And then for in development mode, you have a different set of dependencies, which is just like, hey, someone actually wants to hack on your thing, and they need to run the tests. This allows you to like do a thing called npm publish, which will like upload your whole package to the repository. But then there's this extra special thing, like even if you don't want to publish your code, which like rarely, I've honestly never published anything to npm, but I use this pattern all the time for the dependencies, so that I can easily say, like I can share this project with my buddy on my team who I'm working with, and he can just say npm install, which will go through all the dependencies that I've added, and it will automatically bring those in. So you remember a few slides back when I was saying npm install Express, npm install Mocha. I don't want him to have to know to do all those steps. So I declare all my dependencies in this file, and then he'll get them automatically when he pulls it in. So that's really modules in a nutshell. Like we we wrote some code. If you don't export anything, then your code is pretty much useless. So we exported the say method. We imported it in the command line tool. We imported it into our tests. We imported it into a web server. We wrote some tests. All that module exporting and importing is like, in other words, it's called composition. Like JavaScript is really amazing at being able to compose a big thing out of little bits of small things. So that's really what that's all about. And like to the outside world, we write package.json. And that's if you want to share with the outside world, but also if you want to consume from the outside world by declaring which packages from NPM you want to use. I'm just going to basically skip over this section. Node.js API is sort of like the core API. I don't know if you've been to this site before. It's really well documented, really well tested. A lot of these things are very stable. But I'm going to basically recommend, like, for like if you're getting into Node, like skip this and go right over to NPM, the Node package manager, because like this thing is actually meant to be really small. Like they're trying to make the core library as small as possible. They actually remove things from it as they approach 1.0. They want to pare it down and make it as tight as possible and not be this sprawling like standard library. The standard library really lives in userland, which is all the user-published packages on Node. It's where the core API is small. Node NPM is absolutely enormous. Right now, there's 65,000 packages in there. It's growing at a rate of 67 packages a day. You can see NPM is like that red line. It's growing basically faster than any other public package repository ever has. It's about to overtake my favorite Ruby gems and I guess Maven. And like the real key is to know like which packages are the good ones, because there's like such a sea, there's like an ocean of stuff out there. So you really need to learn to sniff out quality. And I recommend, like when you're on the NPM.js homepage, there's all these like ways to look through. You can look through by most starred and most required. I would say like go through those lists and basically like read about every one of those packages and like build your own bag of tricks. I can sort of like roughly show you my bag of tricks, and like if you want to like check out my slides later and like read through what these modules are, that's great. You probably use a bunch of the same ones, but the point is like you should discover for yourself like what kinds of apps you want to build and what tools you want to put in your toolbox. Like these are just mine. Abraham Lincoln did not say this, but I think it's hilarious that everyone attributes quotes to Abraham Lincoln that he didn't say. So another thing is like learn packages that you want to put in your toolbox, but as you are looking at them, look at who wrote them, because you'll quickly realize that like a few guys and gals are writing are just fantastic authors. Like for example, like between the two first people here, Substack and TJ, like out of those 65,000 modules, they've written like 64,000 of them. They are like the lion's share of everything that's great in NPM. And then Isaac and like, I know there's just a bunch of these guys. Like for me, I like to follow them. It's not so much about what they produce, but it's also like the way they write their JavaScript, the philosophies that they put into their code. Like I try and like learn from them and like embody their practices. And like, as you probably know, in JavaScript, there's not one way to write it. There's like so many different ways to do flow control. Some people are like promises. Some people like callbacks. Some people like streams. So you sort of like end up getting into a camp. And I think that the best way to get into that camp is to just like find some idols to follow. And like these are mine. People say sometimes that like when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And they say that like that's a bad thing. But hammers are amazing, and like you can like build stuff or smash stuff, and like it doesn't like there's nothing about the design of a hammer that implies at all what you're going to build with that hammer, versus like a tool that's like very custom purpose. And so like that analogy to me is like we do a lot of Rails, but Rails really only builds one kind of thing, and that's sort of like a database-backed web application. But Node is actually a completely general purpose tool. So you can do your conventional web applications. As I talked about, you can do real-time web applications, which is like a paradigm shift, I think. And then you can do like cross-platform desktop applications, which is something amazing that I've become interested in since, I don't know if you have like paid attention to GitHub. They recently published this like desktop text editor called atom.io. And it's like all the rage, and like they're sending out invites. I recommend you check it out. But the fascinating thing to me is like that's actually a Node.js project. There's this project called Node WebKit, which lets you sort of like it takes Node and puts it literally in the browser, and then like so that you get access to the file system, you get access to the entire Node API, you get access to all of NPM, plus you get this presentation layer in the browser, and you can compile native desktop applications that work on like Windows, Mac, and Linux. And so like, to me, like that's been a missing link for a long time. I've long wanted to do desktop applications, but didn't really want to get away from web technology. So like, I was so excited when I learned about that, and like I'm sure it's gonna come up, for me at least, in my next few projects. Network servers I talked about. You can control robots with Node. This guy here has got like Node. This isn't me by any means, but he's got like Node on an Arduino. You can put Node directly on Arduino boards. And like I said, they can listen on the network, and so you can talk to them from an HTML5 interface. This guy's controlling an ARM. I think there's like a video of this. Is it not working? Okay, sorry. Right. So anyway, like Node is a general purpose tool, and I just wanted to like let you know that like, it's not just for writing JSON APIs. It's like very ignorant of what you want to do with it. All it really thinks about is network connections, asynchronous I/O. Like that's the basic concept inside it. So the last couple things I wanted to say, I'm like running out of time here, so maybe I should just like gloss over this and ask if you have any questions. But like Node has a really vibrant community, some amazing conferences. At TWG, we started to host a Toronto Node.js meetup, so swing by to that if you're ever interested. I have to mention this podcast, which like has been amazingly informative to me, called Node Up. They have a bunch of episodes on everything, but like they have a few specific team episodes. Like the Groupon team that switched their enormous application from Rails to Node. The Walmart team, which is like they have this episode on Black Friday and how they like scaled with all the traffic. And Trello, I don't know if you've used it, it's like a web-based Kanban, like project management tool. It's completely real-time, WebSockets based. These teams go in depth and talk about like how Node fits into their team, how they do JavaScript, what all their principles are, what packages and tools they use. It's absolutely phenomenal. Right, and so yeah, just be excited about Node. It's super, super exciting. The points that I want to get across is like how powerful it is, yet how simple it is. I'm sure there are more powerful things out there, but like the simplicity of JavaScript means that everyone already kind of knows JavaScript. We do it in the browser. It's something you can't really get away from. It's not going away anytime soon. And so therefore, it's like a really low barrier to entry for doing this kind of like heavy lifting work. Yeah, so I think I have like a couple minutes left. If there's any questions, I know I like ripped through that really quickly. Is there anybody who's like wondering anything? Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. So you'll find that when you hit Express, like just go to the NPM page for Express, and they'll sort of like cover all the methods that come with that package. There's get, post, like delete, all the basic ones, and then there's a bunch of like more advanced ones where you can do a lot more detail. Express is like a fantastic library. I didn't have really time to go into it, but obviously like in the MEAN stack, it's like the E part, and you definitely want to check that out. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So it's, like I said, Node can be a web server, but it's very common to put a proxy server in front of it. So for us, that's been Nginx. Is like a fantastic application proxy. A lot of people use HA proxy, called high availability proxy. You can use Apache, or you can just, like if you got more of a toy application that's a little more of a prototype or like a low traffic site, you could just try running Node there. So yeah, there's like a lot of options. It's very common to do proxies outside of Node as well as writing your own proxies. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I hear this sometimes. I think a lot of people are excited about Node, that they can run the same code on the client and the server. In practice, I actually don't see that happening very much. I think it's almost going in the other way, where the server and the client are becoming completely disconnected. It's almost like your clients your server knows nothing about your clients, and like your clients are going to be like native like Android and iOS applications or client JavaScript applications. They're almost like two projects. Like literally at our studio, we'll do like a project that is like, let's say it's Angular on the front end and Node on the back end. That'll be two code repositories that are like, there's like a division in between where they're not even meant to know anything about each other, which encourages like best practices in like architecture, where like you sort of, you plan for the future and like you don't know what the client's going to want to do, so you really just make the server like almost like a data store or a database. Yeah. So yeah, and I know like a lot of people talk about code sharing, but I don't see it panning out that way presently. Yeah. Yeah. So like JavaScript is, so it's a single process, single thread. There is no threading. Like you can actually spin up multiple processes, obviously, and run multiple processes, but like by default, Node is one process, one thread. So the concurrency primitive is something called the reactor pattern, which if you're using JavaScript, you're already using. It's event-based, so it's asynchronous code, and like when you're waiting for something, when you're waiting for the database to return a row, something else starts processing. It's kind of like when you're doing JavaScript on the web and like your code doesn't run until someone clicks something. It's the same event-based model on the server where until something is ready to go, nothing runs. So like the interpreter actually like skips around and runs all different parts of your code. All the client connections are all in the same process, in the same thread, running at the same time. So it's sort of like you look into more about that. Look into like the asynchronous primitives in JavaScript. Like I said, if you've done any JavaScript in the browser, you'll have a gut level familiarity with them. But it's definitely like outside of the scope of what I can really explain in a couple minutes. One more question, if there's anybody who has any more questions, any things that weren't quite clear. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, so it's all about running out of CPU. If you had one CPU on your server, there would be no reason to run more than one process. But because many servers have 4 or 8 or 16 cores, there's in the Node core API, the main API that I glossed over there, there's something called the cluster API, which is basically a helper that lets you start up your Node process, and then it automatically forks into a lot of different processes that all do the same work. So it's built into Node the ability to run multiple processes and handle and spread your work across multiple cores. Not at all. Not at all. The idea is like all sockets that your app is listening to are shared amongst all the workers. So you really just treat it as I'm just writing a single process, single threaded application. All my connections are coming into my one app, but all the worker processes that you forked all share those connections, and it just gets divvied up automatically. Like your kernel actually does that. Like Windows or Linux kernel actually does that socket sharing internally among like child processes. Look at the thing you want to check out is the Node Core API. There's a list of modules that are part of Core. The one you're interested in is Cluster. It's very low surface API. It's just all about forking a bunch of workers, restarting them when they crash. All right, thanks a lot, guys.